AAA podcast where we talk about attributions, attitudes, and actions. Today I'm going to be joined by a special guest, but before I introduce them, I'm going to talk to you guys about what we are going to cover. So today we are going to talk about the attribution theory and how our attributions matter, the fundamental attribution error, how our attitude can affect our actions. We're going to talk about two phenomenons, the foot in the door and the door in the face phenomenon. And we're also going to talk about how roleplay affects attitudes. And lastly, the cognitive dissonance theory is the last thing we're going to talk about. Now I'm going to introduce you the first guest of the day. Today I have with me Fritz Heider. Welcome in, Heider. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
All right, are you ready for some questions?
Always.
Always? All right, that's good to know. All right. So my first question today is, what's the attribution theory?
The attribution theory is basically when you explain someone's behavior by crediting either the situation that the person's in or the person's disposition, which is their personality.
Thank you. So my next question for you are, what are the factors of attribution?
So the factors of attribution, there's like two big ones that we like to focus on. The first one is culture. And we see this because Westerners tend to attribute bad behavior to the situation, and East Asians tend to attribute good behavior to the person. The second factor is the self-serving bias. And we see this when people reflect on their own actions, they're more likely to attribute their bad behavior to the situation and their good behavior to the disposition or the person's personality.
All right, now my next question is, how do our attributions matter?
Okay, so we see our attributions in real life in the political system in America. And the way we see this is because conservatives tend to believe that the reason for poverty and unemployment is completely attributed to the disposition of a person, which is like their personality or their work ethic. And liberals tend to believe that poverty and unemployment is completely attributed to a person's situation, which would be like their upbringing or their family situation at home.
Thank you very much, Heider. All right. Our next question is, what is a fundamental attribution error?
So a fundamental attribution error is when somebody tends to overestimate the personal disposition and underestimate the situation that the person's in.
And can you tell us about the Williams College experiment that had to do with this?
Okay, so in this experiment, there was a group of college students, and half of them were told that a woman was acting, either nice or mean, and half was not told this. So even when she was acting, the people still thought that the type of person she was based on how she acted, which was her personality or disposition, not on her acting, which is the situation that she was in.
So even the people that knew she was acting still thought that she was a bad person if she acted bad?
Yes.
That is very interesting. So my last question is, how does attitude affect the actions of a person?
Okay, so basically we see attitude affecting actions through persuasion, which is used to change a person's attitude and influence their behavior.
So I've actually heard about this with the Williams College experiment. So people were told that tanning causes skin cancer, so then people tended to go to tanning beds less. And I also heard that there are two types of persuasion.
That's true.
Yeah, and the first type, if I'm right, is...
I'll tell you if you're right.
Thank you. Is central route persuasion, which is where the person trying to persuade you uses arguments and questions to people, which makes people have more critical and deep thinking.
You got it.
Yeah, and the next one is peripheral route persuasion, which, if I'm correct, is when people are influenced by incidental clues. Like, for example, if a movie star promotes something, which is seen a lot with Leonardo DiCaprio. He tends to promote and try to sway people's opinions about global warming and try to raise awareness.
That's correct.
All right.
You're right on the money.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is all we have. This is all we have time for right now. We have to hit a commercial break, but after the break, we'll be back with two more guests.
Our reputation doesn't control us. Our career doesn't block us from our true calling. Because you know that as good as it feels to celebrate our accomplishments, it feels better to keep working for the good of all mankind. And if we work together to build a brighter future for today, you can make history tomorrow. Make history.
We are back from the commercial commercial break, and now I'm going to invite two new guests. First, let me introduce you to Philip Zimbardo.
Hello, Philip.
Welcome in. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. How
That is amazing. I'm doing great. All right, now we are going to welcome in Leon Festinger. Welcome in, Leon. How are you doing? Nice to meet you. Oh, it's amazing to see you. All right, how are you doing?
Great.
That's amazing. Okay, first I have a question for you, Zimbardo. All right, what is the foot in the door phenomenon?
Well, first I'm going to go over how our actions affect our attitudes. Well, how we behave and what we do shapes our attitudes. And the foot in the door phenomenon kind of goes along with this. If we first agree to a small request, we will more likely agree to a bigger one later on. So you want to start small and then build up. So an example of this is when a friend asks to borrow a small amount of money, then later asks to borrow a larger amount of money.
Wow, thank you. That is so interesting. All right, now I have a question for you, Leon. What is the door in the face technique?
Well, the door in the face technique is basically the opposite of the foot in the door phenomenon. First, you start with this giant request, but then you follow it with an actual smaller request. So you ask like for $1,000, but then you actually ask for 100 and they agree to that. So it's a lot better than the first option.
Wow, that is so interesting. All right. The next question is for you, Zimbardo. What was your experiment on how roleplay affects attitudes? Can you tell me about that?
Well, let's go over kind of what this is. So when you adopt a new role, you strive to follow social norms and expectations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, sooner or later, what you do becomes you. And so I wanted to create this experiment. So I randomly assigned some volunteers to be guards in a prison and some prisoners to be locked up in cells. And they took on these roles, and one by one the prisoners broke down and became rebellious, and the guards developed disparaging attitudes. So after 6 days, I had to call off the study because it just became too extreme and their attitudes were influenced too much by the situation.
That is a terrifying
It
experiment.
was scary.
Wow. Are you still alive today?
I am. I'm
That is
I'm
amazing.
real, though.
That is amazing.
I'm living on a string.
That is amazing. All right, next question is for you, Leon. So, can you tell me about the cognitive dissonance theory?
Okay, this relates to what Zimbardo was talking about. So, in the brain, you experience mental tension when attitudes and actions do not line up. This is cognitive dissonance. And so, like, their roles were not the same as their attitudes. And so, your brain regions experience negative arousal and become active, and you experience this cognitive dissonance. The more dissonance you feel, to reduce the uncomfortable tension, you will change your attitudes and actions so they line up.
Thanks for telling us a little bit about this theory, Leon. That's all we have time for today, but let's talk about what we covered. So we have covered the attribution theory and how our attributions matter. We have covered the fundamental attribution error. We also covered how our attribute affects actions, the foot in the door and the door in the face phenomenons, two very interesting phenomenons. We covered how roleplay affects attitudes, and lastly, the cognitive dissonance theory. And that is all. I hope to see you guys next time, and this is AAA signing out with attributions, attitudes, and actions. So what are some of the factors?
I went to my mustache.
How? Okay. Okay.
I'm crying.
We got a girl crying.
Okay.
Can I have the microphone, please? Thank you very much. So,
I feel like I'm gonna cry.
okay, alright, do it again. And we see this because Westerners tend. Restart it. I can't.
I hope you guys are good at editing.
Stash a little bit.
Go, bro.
Sorry. He promotes a lot about global warming and how we can change it.
Global warming.